It's certainly a worrying time for many employers and employees because of COVID-19. The message from the government from the start of August was to get back to work.
I want people to go back to work as carefully as possible. I think it's very important that people should be, going back to work if they can now. I think everybody's sort of taken the stay at home if you can. I think we should now sort of say, well, go back to work if you can, because I think it's very important that people should try to lead their lives more normally. I want to see more people feeling confident to use the shops, use the restaurants, get back into work, but only if we all follow the guidance.
But the big question is, are there any jobs to go back to? Nearly 1,800 UK companies have told the government of plans to cut 20 or more jobs in June. More than 22,000 restaurant jobs have been shed so far this year because of the pandemic, causing swathes of closures across the sector. And also 200,000 people over the age of 50 have dropped out of the workforce. I've been speaking to Mairi Spowage, who's from the Fraser of Allander Institute, part of the Department of Economics at the University of Strathclyde. She told me there's not much optimism out there at the moment.
From our most recent survey of businesses, many are going to be operating at maybe half capacity, maybe three-quarters capacity, which might mean that they don't need as many staff as they've had in the past. A lot of businesses have been through a difficult period, have taken on increased debt, so we'll be evaluating their financial situation overall. And if the way that the business is going to survive is by reducing their workforce slightly, then a lot of people are going to take that option. There's also difficulties for a number of people who may still feel vulnerable to catching the virus. It's still out there. Although, for example, the Scottish Government in Scotland has paused shielding now, there'll be a number of people who still feel vulnerable or maybe have vulnerable members of their household and might be worried about going on public transport, about how they get to work, and then, what sort of situation they might be put in when they go back to work.
Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it? There's the long-term effects, but this short-term effect as well is also going to be a big issue for employers.
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot of onus being put on employers to ensure that they're doing the right risk assessments and ensuring that their employees are safe. And this is the right thing to do, of course. But all of this comes with a cost to business. They're going to have to be thinking about a lot of different things. Not only will they be having to operate at reduced capacity, they're probably going to face much higher costs than in the past because they have to go through all these processes of risk assessment, perhaps increased cleaning, all of these different things that employers will have to consider when they're, opening up their businesses to get customers back in.
How are some of these companies going to recover that have already made thousands of people redundancies? Some really big companies haven't we seen the effect of coronavirus? I mean, is there any way back for some of these?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think some of the companies that we've seen making people redundant or perhaps going into administration were probably companies that were struggling a wee bit prior to the crisis. We have seen a decline of traditional retail and people going into shops, particularly for clothing, for non-food. And so some of these companies that have announced store closures or job losses and so on were probably struggling a wee bit prior to the crisis, and this has just kind of maybe accelerated that and shone a light on that because people have been at home, these shops haven't been open, and so more people than ever will be turning to online shopping and changing their shopping habits, and a lot of that is going to come back. So there's also the interesting question about town and city centres and how that might change as places of business think about how much things like office space they actually need, given that maybe a lot of their workers might want to work from home more. So there's a real question about the kind of future of our town and city centres and how that's going to pan out and how that might impact on the retailers and cafes and other shops that kind of rely on people going into these centres to work.
And just finally, Mairi, is there any reason to be optimistic at all? The long road ahead?
Well, we are seeing, the economy start to open up. Obviously, it is a bit different in different parts of the UK in terms of the speed and the types of businesses that are opening up. But we are seeing that come back. In terms of from a low base in economic activity, we will see growth in the economy. But that will go hand in hand with increasing unemployment as the job retention scheme is unwound. So it is quite an uncertain picture ahead. I guess what we would say is it looks like the most economic damage would come if there was a significant second wave and second lockdown. So the important thing is to try and avoid that and ensure that the public health guidance is being followed, so that when businesses are opening now, that's them opening, and they're only going to sort of increase their capacity over the coming months, hopefully, to get back on track. I'm not sure if that's an optimistic note. That's maybe the best I can do right now.
It seems the figures speak for themselves. These are some of the job loss numbers at some of our major companies. WH Smith, 1,500. Dixon's Carphone, 800. Pizza Express, 1,100 jobs at risk. Selfridges, 450. Boots, 4,000. John Lewis, 1,300 at risk. Burger King, 1,600 at risk. Pret a Manger, 1,000. Airbus, 1,700. Royal Mail, 2,000. The Restaurant Group, which owns Frankie and Benny's, 3,000 jobs. EasyJet, 4,500 worldwide. Rolls-Royce, 9,000. TUI, 8,000 worldwide. P&O Ferries, 1,100. Virgin Atlantic, 3,150. Ryanair, 3,000 jobs worldwide. And British Airways, 12,000 across the board. The list goes on. Dominic, Curran, Property Policy Advisor at the British Retail Consortium, expects several companies to disappear altogether.
Retailers haven't seen footfall increase to anything like the level that it was just last year. It's probably still at about 50 or 60% of where it was. We have seen retail sales hold up to an extent, but I think that's partly because after lockdown and people being very constrained in what they could go out and purchase, all they've really done is use some of that kind of pent-up demand to go out and buy the things that perhaps they needed to buy anyway. And also we've seen a shift in the way that people are spending, so they're not going out buying the same sorts of things like clothing and footwear and fashion and those sorts of discretionary items. They're buying things that they need for often working at home. So there's a different sort of spend on furniture and printers and computers and home office equipment and things like that. So whilst we're seeing spending to an extent holding up, I certainly don't expect that to carry on in the future, certainly as the job retention or furlough scheme gets unwound and as we start seeing the economic impact of a lot of businesses, frankly, having to close over the next few months.
Yeah, how worried are you by the changes to the furlough scheme?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to see potentially a lot of businesses winding down, or rather a lot of jobs winding down and businesses entering into administration, frankly. At the end of the summer, at the end of September, we're also seeing the end of a series of tenant protections in commercial leases. So landlords will be able, unless the scheme is extended, landlords will be able to chase tenants for any rent arrears in ways that they haven't been able to do, they won't have been able to do for 6 months. And that gives the pointer as to what the real problem is, which is rent arrears. A lot of businesses that were closed haven't had the income or footfall to pay the rent that they've been liable for over the last few months. And even where they have reopened, as I say, footfall and trade hasn't been anywhere near the extent that it was before COVID. So what we're potentially going to see is a whole series of companies being liable for those debts at the end of September, and at the same time as having to pay potentially the full-time wages of staff. And I think what we're going to see is a combination of companies entering into administration and those staff being made redundant, with quite large numbers of people entering into unemployment, unfortunately. And I think that's solvable if the government does something on rents.
So people are being asked to adapt to the new normal, but does the new normal mean high unemployment figures in the months ahead?